Hello and welcome back to the Wrestling Group. I'm your host as always, Ryan, and today we're going to be looking at the Aces and Eights. Now, the Aces and Eights were a faction in TNA from June 2012 to November 2013, and for the most part the faction was received well by fans, but the storyline did end up dragging on too long, and with barely any wrestlers gaining a rub from it and progressing to better things after it was over. In fact, most members ended up leaving the company. The faction debuted on the June 14th episode of Impact with three masked members attacking the icon Sting as he was discussing his induction into the TNA Hall of Fame. Over the next few weeks, the gang would attack both faces and heels alike and were originally introduced as a vigilante group. Eventually, each of the members were unmasked, revealing to the world their true identities. And this is where we will be keeping our focus today in this video, as we rank every member of the Aces and Eights from the worst to the best. Members that were used in just one or very few solo appearances won't be counted here. As always, feel free to let us know in the comments section below where you would rank every member of the Aces and Eights faction. A shout out to Nick Codaro for suggesting this video. So we'll start in at the very worst and then make our way down to the very best. So in at number 12, Garrett Bischoff. Yes, you guessed it, the son of Eric Bischoff, Garrett comes in as the worst member of the Aces and Eights. Clearly put into this faction just because of who his dad was, he was in the faction for around 11 months. Garrett was not talented in the ring or on the microphone. He accomplished nothing in the faction or then afterwards. For the most part, he teamed with Wes Briscoe, but they failed to capture the TNA tag team titles on more than one occasion. In at number 11, Tito Ortiz. Now, Ortiz debuted in TNA as a member of the Aces and Eights, but his role in the faction was pretty pointless from the get-go. Due to him being under contract with Bellator, and with a fight coming up, Tito wasn't actually allowed to do anything physical in case of an injury. So for the 1 month he was in the faction, he pretty much just stood there looking tough. His inclusion in the faction did nothing for it or for him. Number 10, CJ O'Doyle. I'm sure there are a lot of you right now saying who, and that wouldn't be a surprise as CJ went for the most part under the radar in Aces and Eights. Sure, he did a lot of the actual ring work for them while he was part of the faction, but in terms of story, he offered very little. And again, he failed to do anything of note after the group split. Number 9, D'Lo Brown. Now, D'Lo spent a few months in Aces and Eights, but offered next to nothing to the faction apart from the fact he was well known. By his own admission, he was never to be a big part of the faction and more of a stand-in at the time. D'Lo competed very little for Aces. In fact, I'm sure his only match he had resulted in a loss and an exit from both the faction and the company. Number 8, Brooke. Brooke came into the faction as the First Lady, but for the most part she would serve as Bully Ray's manager rather than her being the female talent of the group, which was disappointing. She lasted just 4 months in Aces and Eights as it was coming to the end. Number 7, Taz. Now, Taz wasn't wrestling at the time. He was a commentator, but he played his heel role well and was also used as one of the main spokespeople for the Aces and Eights, thus helping with storylines. Taz was one of the more well-known names in the faction and one of the better received by fans considering most members lacked in the mic skills department. Number 6, Nux. Nux is the one that probably looked the part the most. He generally looked like he could be in a motorbike gang. Nux joined Aces and Eights upon his arrival in TNA and was with them from the beginning to the end. For the most part, he didn't offer too much, but as the story was coming to a close, he became a sort of voice of reason between the members who started to clash. Number 5. Wes Briscoe. Now, Briscoe was in the faction for around 9 months before being kicked out for losing a match to Samoa Joe. Briscoe wasn't bad in the ring, but his pairing with Bischoff definitely held him back. As I stated earlier, they failed to capture the tag titles on more than one occasion. One of the guys that they could have actually pushed on with after the fact, but instead he ended up being released by the company. Number 4. Doc. Doc is another member who actually looked like he could have been a part of the motorbike gang. Doc was used as one of the muscle guys in the faction, but also played a part in most of the main storylines. Unfortunately, Doc has never been great on the mic and is average in the ring, but I still think we could have held a title during this time. After all, he did wrestle more than most during his time in Aces and Eights. Doc would eventually not just leave the faction, but also the company, as he opted to join New Japan. Number 3. Mr. Anderson. Now, Mr. Anderson played a major role within the Aces and Eights, including a storyline that would eventually split up the faction. I liked Anderson's inclusion in Aces and Eights as his gimmick had become so stale. It was basically the gimmick that he'd had in WWE with just a name change, from Mr. Kennedy to Mr. Anderson. Anderson was the second vice president and would be in the faction for 9 months in total. Eventually, Anderson would be kicked from the group for questioning Bully's actions and would then defeat Bully in a match with the stipulation that if Anderson won, the Aces and Eights would be dissolved. Number 2. Devon. Devon was the first member of the Aces to be unmasked. The rest of the unmasking never really lived up to the shock of this one, as for a long time he was the biggest name of the faction. Devon was one of just 2 members to hold the title during the faction's time. He was the TNA television champion for most of his run in Aces and Eights. Devon was the first sergeant in arms and will be involved in most of the top storylines that went on within the Aces and Eights until he eventually lost a match against Main Event Mafia, and like so many others on this list, also left the company. So in at number 1, Bully Ray. I don't think anyone can dispute the ranking of Bully. Bully originally started out against the Aces and Eights working alongside Sting and then TNA general manager Hulk Hogan. Bully would use Hogan's daughter Brooke to gain the trust of Hogan, which would then lead to the TNA general manager gifting Bully a TNA World Heavyweight Championship match, which he would win after turning heel and joining the Aces and Eights. The next week, Bully would tell the world he was in fact the leader all along. The best thing about Aces was definitely the rise of Bully to the main event. He would hold the TNA World title twice during his time with the faction. He went from being a tag team wrestler to a solo star. His character work improved and his mic skills too. So there you have it, every member of the Aces and Eights ranked from worst to best. Do you agree with our list? Let us know in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to the wrestling group today.